The desert world lay under a blanket of silence. The wind carried fine dust across the endless wasteland, swirling around forgotten metal and buried wreckage. The sky was pale and dry, untouched by any sound. No ships crossed this place anymore. The galaxy had stopped caring about this dead planet a long time ago. To them, it was just a graveyard, a scar from a war they believed they had already won. Somewhere beneath the cracked earth, deep inside the forgotten sands, a giant metal shape rested like a sleeping beast. It had been silent for decades, covered by storms and time. But silence has a way of hiding things, not erasing them. And this silence was about to break. Far away in the heart of the alien empire, council chambers glowed with golden light. Their leaders raised their heads proudly, convinced they had crushed the last of humanity. They told themselves Earth's fleet had been burned, its warships lost, its people scattered like ash. They celebrated victory every year on this day. Songs were sung about the fall of the Terran Fleet. None of them even mentioned the Titan anymore. It was just a name in a book, a piece of history that no one feared now. But while they laughed, the sensors in one of their border outposts picked up something strange. A pulse. A single low-frequency wave coming from the graveyard world. It was faint, buried beneath layers of static. At first they ignored it. Then the pulse came again, stronger this time. Back on the planet, the ground trembled. A soft vibration crawled through the dust, like the heartbeat of something waking up. Beneath the layers of sand, ancient Terran systems flickered with dull blue light. Rusty panels clicked. Engines that had slept in the dark for 50 years began to warm. The Titan had never been destroyed. It had been waiting. Buried in the dust like a secret, it was more than a warship. It was a weapon built to end wars. It was the last breath of a fleet that refused to die. Slowly its massive frame shifted, sending waves of dust rising into the air. The sand above it cracked and slid down like water over steel. A lone alien patrol ship happened to be flying low above the desert, monitoring old battlefields. The pilot saw the dust storm first. At first, he thought it was just wind. Then he noticed the ground splitting open. He leaned forward in his cockpit, squinting. Something enormous was moving down there. Then the scanners went wild. Energy readings spiked off the charts, way beyond anything their systems had seen in years. His hands shook as he sent the emergency signal to command. "Something is waking up," he whispered to himself, but his voice was lost under the rising storm. Inside the Titan's control core, a faint blue glow filled the main bridge. Artificial intelligence routines came online, one after another, like doors opening in the dark. Power surged through ancient veins of steel. Long-dead screens lit up with maps, codes, and star charts. A low hum filled the halls, the kind of sound that felt alive. In the stasis bay, heavy doors hissed open. Human crew members, old soldiers from a forgotten war, stepped out slowly, their breath visible in the cold air. Their faces were marked by time, but their eyes burned with something the galaxy had underestimated: resolve. One of them placed his hand on a control panel. "Wake the Titan," he said softly. And the Titan obeyed. The tremors grew stronger. The ground shook like thunder. Crates buried in sand exploded upward. Birds fled into the air in a storm of wings. The massive warship's nose broke through the surface first, followed by its black and silver hull. Its armor plates were scarred from battles fought long ago, but its shape was unmistakable, a Terran Titan-class warship, the kind that had once made entire fleets retreat at the sound of its engines. It rose from the sand like a god, rising from its grave. Above the desert, alien scanners from nearby patrols started flashing red. Across distant communication lines, messages flooded the network. Commanders shouted orders. No one believed what they were seeing. "It's impossible," someone said in panic. The Titan was destroyed, but the image was clear. The ship they had feared the most was standing once again. Inside the council chamber, celebration turned to silence. The laughter stopped. The Emperor's golden cup trembled in his hand as one of his generals whispered the report into his ear. "The Titan," the general said. Just those two words were enough to drain all the light from the room. The storm over the desert thickened. Lightning cracked across the sky, as if the world itself felt the weight of the ship awakening. Slowly, the Titan's engines roared to life, shaking the ground like the steps of a giant. Ancient railguns locked into position, shields powered up with a growl. Dust swirled around the massive warship, wrapping it like a shroud. For 50 years, they thought Earth's fleet was gone. For 50 years, they laughed at the name Titan, but now the storm had returned. And this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a promise of war. And far away in the cold dark of space, every sensor in the galaxy turned toward the silent desert. Something powerful had awakened. Something they thought would never rise again. But it was here. And it was only the beginning. The alien council chamber was filled with laughter that echoed across the golden walls. Their leaders sat on high thrones, their long robes shining under the warm light. Holograms floated in the air, showing maps of conquered worlds. Human worlds. They had turned the fall of Earth's fleet into a holiday, a celebration of their power. The Emperor lifted his golden cup and declared once again that humanity had finally disappeared from the stars. A weak race, he said with a calm smile, buried by the weight of their own defeat. The chamber burst into applause. To them, humans were history, a story told to make children believe in victory. But far away in the silent desert, a storm was growing, and none of them knew it yet. A soft pulse had already shaken the senses of their outer patrols. Commanders in control rooms leaned forward, confused by strange readings from an old battlefield. They whispered to each other, unsure if it was a system error or something real. "It's probably nothing," one said. "Just broken metal heating under the sun." But the pulse kept returning, stronger each time. A few officers frowned. They had seen this kind of signal before, long ago during the last days of the Terran War, but they shook the thought away. It was impossible. Humanity's Titan fleet had been destroyed. That was what they were told. That was what they believed. Back in the Golden Hall, the Emperor stood and spread his arms. "The age of humans has ended. The Golden Empire stands unchallenged," he declared. His voice echoed like a god's, making everyone rise to their feet. They chanted the name of their empire, their faith in their own strength, blinding them to what was really happening beneath their boots. Not a single one of them imagined that something old and dangerous was waking from the dust. They had forgotten what fear felt like. A messenger entered the chamber quietly, holding a glowing data crystal. His eyes were wide, his hands shaking. "Your Majesty," he said carefully. The Emperor didn't like interruptions during celebrations. The room went silent. "There has been a pulse detected on the graveyard world," the messenger continued. "The pattern matches old Terran signals." For a heartbeat, the golden room froze. Some laughed again, waving it off as a glitch. "Terran signals? Impossible," a minister said. "There are no Terrans left. Their fleet was erased." But the Emperor's smile faded just a little. He asked, "How strong is the signal?" The messenger hesitated. "It's growing." Far away, the wind howled over the desert world. The sand twisted in violent spirals, as if the ground itself was breathing. Old antennas buried in the sand trembled. Lights hidden under layers of rock glimmered like forgotten stars. The Titan's heartbeat was no longer a whisper. It was a drumbeat now, steady, powerful, and rising. On the surface, the alien patrol ship circled nervously. The pilot's claws gripped the controls as the scanners flashed red. "Command," he said through the comm. "There's something down there. It's moving." Static filled the line, then came the voice of his superior, impatient and bored. "You're imagining things. That world is dead." But as the pilot watched, the sand below began to crack. Dust exploded upward in a long, violent wave. His breath caught in his throat. "No," he whispered. "It's not dead." Back in the council chamber, the Emperor listened to the reports. More sensors were waking up. Energy spikes were now undeniable. The image of the graveyard world appeared on a large golden screen behind him. Tremors rippled through the sands like veins of light. The Emperor stared at the glowing lines on the map and whispered a name he hadn't spoken in decades. "Titan!" The word hung in the air like a ghost. The council chamber fell silent. Ministers shifted uncomfortably. Some tried to argue. The Titan was destroyed. It's impossible. But they all knew. Deep down they remembered the stories. The night the Titan appeared in the war, the night whole fleets vanished in its shadow. Their ancestors had feared it. Their soldiers had whispered about it. And now, something that should not exist was waking again. Outside in the desert, the storm built higher. The sand screamed against the metal rising beneath it. The alien patrol pilot sent one last message. His voice shook. "It's here," he said. "The Titan lives." Then the transmission cut to static. In the golden chamber, the Emperor stood still. His golden cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. The great and proud Golden Empire had celebrated its victory too early. The ghost of the past was rising from the dust, and it was coming for them. They had forgotten the fear of humanity's warships. Now they would remember. The mockery ended. The storm had begun. Deep beneath the cracked desert surface, the Titan's reactor core pulsed like the heart of some ancient beast. The glow of blue light spread through buried corridors, spilling into dark control rooms and engine chambers where dust had gathered for decades. For years, this massive ship had slept, forgotten and buried, but now every panel, every line of steel, and every system felt alive again. It started with a low hum, a soft, steady vibration that grew louder with each second. The metal shook like something waking after a long nightmare. Rust peeled away from old surfaces as hidden lights flickered back to life. The air filled with the deep, steady rhythm of power returning. The bridge of the Titan was a dark cathedral of steel and memory. Rows of silent consoles blinked awake one after another, like the opening of many eyes. Holographic screens lit up with symbols of Earth, a star wrapped in the blue of oceans and the white of storms. Her voice, cold and precise, echoed across the ship's internal speakers. Reactor core online. Weapon systems dormant. Crew status, stasis lock. The ship was no ghost. It was a machine built to outlive empires. It had waited beneath the sands for exactly this moment. In the stasis bay, a row of glass chambers hissed open, releasing cold vapor into the air. Human soldiers stepped forward slowly, their breaths visible in the chilled light. They were survivors, warriors who had chosen to sleep instead of surrender. Their faces were older than the war itself, their eyes carrying the weight of a broken world. Yet there was no fear in them, only the hard, silent anger of people who had lost everything and still refused to fall. The captain placed his hand on the metal wall, feeling the vibration of the awakening ship. "We rise," he whispered. The Titan seemed to answer with a deep metallic growl. Far above the sand, alien patrol ships circled nervously. The pilots stared down through their scanners at the storm below. What had once been silent ground was now moving, breaking apart like the skin of a sleeping giant. Energy readings shot off the charts. One of the pilots slammed his claws against the comm panel. "Command," he said with a trembling voice, "the ground is alive." But before Command could respond, the sand exploded upward in a massive wave. A black and silver hull rose from the depths like a mountain tearing itself free from the earth. The Titan emerged slowly but powerfully, shaking the world around it. Its armor was scarred with the burns of 100 battles, its body enormous and unbroken. Dust cascaded down its sides like waterfalls. Antennas extended, massive cannons locked into place. The ship's engines released a low, earth-shaking roar that made the patrol pilots' hands freeze on their controls. They had heard stories of the Titan, everyone in the galaxy had, but they had grown up thinking those stories were myths. They weren't myths anymore. Inside the ship, old AI defense systems flickered through combat protocols. Weapon targeting arrays aligned with perfect precision. Railguns that had not fired in 50 years hummed like predators ready to hunt again. Shield generators powered up, glowing with blue light against the pale sun. The captain and his crew stood on the bridge as the control panels stabilized, their faces lit by the reflection of their awakening weapon. "They thought Earth was gone," the captain said softly. "They were wrong." The Alien Council had ignored the first pulse. They could not ignore this. Entire defense networks across the sector began to flash red as energy readings from the desert world spiked like nothing they had seen in generations. Commanders yelled across channels. Fleets were scrambled. Someone whispered the word Titan, and the sound of it spread like cold fire through their ranks. The last time the Titan had moved, it had destroyed 3 armadas in a single day. If it was truly awake now, the Golden Empire was in danger. The alien patrol pilots panicked as the Titan's massive shadow darkened their ships. One of them fired a warning shot out of fear, a thin line of light striking against the Titan's hull like a spark on a mountain. The ship didn't flinch. Instead, its central railgun rotated slowly, locking onto the tiny fighter like a wolf staring down its prey. One blinding flash followed. The patrol ship vanished in a silent explosion, leaving nothing but fire and smoke drifting across the desert sky. Deep in the Titan's core, the engines reached full power. The desert shook violently. Sandstorms twisted outward from the ship's base like wings of fury. For the first time in half a century, the Titan rose from the earth, not crawling, not hesitating, but climbing into the air like a god reclaiming the sky. All across the galaxy, sensors screamed warnings. Fleets turned their eyes toward the graveyard world. The ghost they thought was buried was now alive, and it was climbing back to the stars. The captain stepped forward on the bridge, his voice steady. "We are Terran," he said, "and we don't die in the dirt." The crew straightened their backs. They had not just awakened a ship, they had awakened a storm. And this storm was heading for the heart of the Empire that once thought it had won. The wind screamed across the desert as the Titan climbed higher into the air, its engines carving deep scars into the sand below. The storm it had created stretched for miles, swallowing everything in a roaring, spinning wall of dust. For the alien patrol ships, it was already too late to run. The moment their scanners locked onto the massive black and silver hull, the ship's rail guns rotated into position with machine precision. The air crackled with energy as the Titan's targeting systems locked on. For years they had mocked the name Titan, believing it was just an old war story. Now they faced it with shaking hands and cold terror. One of the patrol pilots screamed through the comm, "It's alive, it's real!" But the next second, his signal turned to static as a railgun round sliced through his ship like a knife through paper. The explosion lit the sky, turning the sandstorm into a storm of fire. The remaining fighters panicked, swerving wildly, trying to escape the storm below and the steel monster rising through it. But they were too slow. One by one, the Titan's cannons fired, each shot hitting with brutal accuracy, erasing ships from the sky like dust blown from a table. Inside the alien command center, the screens filled with red warnings. Emergency alarms echoed through long metal halls as officers shouted over each other. "Patrol unit has been wiped out," one yelled. "We have confirmed visual repeat Titan-class vessel active." Those words froze everyone in the room. Titan-class meant war. Titan-class meant nightmares from a war their ancestors had nearly lost. It meant humanity wasn't gone. It meant they were back. On the Titan's bridge, the captain stood with his hands behind his back, watching the enemy scatter across the horizon. His crew moved with quiet precision, their fingers gliding over glowing panels as if they had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. "Targeting complete," a crew member said calmly. "No resistance remaining in the immediate airspace." The captain gave a short nod. "Then we rise." The engines roared louder, lifting the warship into the sky with terrifying grace. The alien council's golden chamber erupted in chaos. Generals shouted for fleets to be mobilized. Ministers screamed about how this was impossible, and the Emperor's face darkened like a storm cloud. "I want that thing destroyed," he hissed, slamming his hand against the armrest of his throne. "Every ship in the sector now." But even as fleets scrambled, some of the older commanders lowered their eyes. They remembered the First War. They remembered what happened the last time they tried to destroy a Titan. Above the desert, alien reinforcements arrived, sleek golden ships flashing through the sky. Dozens of them, each armed and ready. They moved fast, circling the Titan like predators. But they weren't predators anymore. They were prey, The Titan's shields flared blue as the first wave of missiles hit, but the ship didn't even shake. It just kept rising, slowly, unstoppable. Multiple hostiles approaching, the ship's AI reported in a calm, almost human voice. The captain didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Engage! The sky lit up like a second sun. Beams of white-hot plasma shot out from the Titan's cannons, cutting through the golden ships with surgical precision. One explosion followed another, thunder rolling across the sand. The alien fleet's formation fell apart almost instantly. What they thought was an easy kill turned into a massacre. One desperate pilot tried to ram the Titan directly, but the ship's side guns swiveled and shredded the fighter before it could even get close. In the council chamber, a cold silence replaced the shouting. The Emperor stared at the battlefield in disbelief. His golden fleets, once symbols of dominance, were burning like dry leaves in the storm. No words came out of his mouth. No one dared to speak. They were watching a ghost from their darkest history rise again, unstoppable and merciless. The Titan broke through the upper atmosphere with fire swirling behind it, leaving nothing but wreckage below. Alarm still screamed across alien sectors. Fleets were mobilizing. But the truth was already clear. Their enemy had returned, and it had chosen war. On the bridge, the captain's eyes burned like cold steel. "They wanted a galaxy without us," he said quietly. "We'll remind them who we are." The crew's hands clenched. Their ship, buried and forgotten, was now the spearhead of humanity's return. And the first strike was only the beginning. Panic spread through the alien fleets like fire through dry grass. One moment, they believed the Titan was nothing more than a myth buried under the sands of a forgotten battlefield. The next, their ships were burning in the sky, their proud golden formations scattered like dust before a storm. In orbit above the desert world, chaos reigned. Emergency channels filled with screams, broken orders, and desperate pleas for reinforcements. Captains shouted over each other, unable to understand how one ship could tear their fleet apart so fast. But it wasn't just a ship. It was a Titan, Earth's wrath forged into steel. The alien council chamber was no longer glowing with golden light. It had dimmed into a cold, tense darkness. Generals leaned over the war table, their voices cracking as they reported casualty after casualty. "Patrol squadrons wiped out in under 3 minutes," one said. "First fleet shattered. The Titan is ascending into orbit." The Emperor's hands tightened around the edge of his throne. His knuckles went white. No one dared to look him in the eye. He had built his empire on the lie that humanity was gone. And now that lie was burning in the sky above them. On the Titan's bridge, the crew moved like parts of a living machine. Every light, every alarm, every tremor of the engines felt like the heartbeat of something unstoppable. "Enemy fleet strength 83 vessels," the AI reported in its calm, cold tone. "Recommend full engagement." The captain didn't blink. "Do it," he said. And the Titan responded. Its massive railguns rotated with a deep mechanical growl. Its missile silos opened like jaws preparing to bite. A storm of blue energy surged across its armor as the shield systems locked into full power. The alien fleet, desperate and furious, launched everything they had. Waves of golden missiles streaked across the black sky, converging on the Titan like a sea of fire. But the ship didn't flinch. Blue light expanded around it like a living wall. Explosions bloomed against the shields, lighting up the darkness, but the Titan pushed forward. Each impact only made it look more like a god walking through a storm. Then came the reply. A single railgun fired, and an entire enemy cruiser vanished in a ball of fire. The shockwave rippled through space like a punch. Before the alien captains could react, the Titan's forward batteries opened fire, launching a precision barrage that tore through formation after formation. Ships that once carried the Empire's flag broke apart like glass in a hurricane. The alien fleet had numbers. The Titan had power, and power didn't need mercy. Inside the council chamber, the ministers shouted for retreat, but the Emperor slammed his fist down. "No retreat," he hissed. "We are the Golden Empire. One ship cannot destroy us." But his voice no longer carried the same weight. In his eyes was something he hadn't felt in years, fear, an old familiar fear. The same fear that had haunted his ancestors when the Titan first rose to power long ago. Above the desert, orbital satellites captured every second of the battle. The entire empire saw their golden fleet being ripped apart by a single ship they had sworn was long dead. The image spread like wildfire through their channels, one black warship surrounded by flames, moving like it owned the stars. Soldiers who had once mocked humanity stared at the screens with wide eyes, their confidence shattering. On the Titan, the captain watched the chaos unfold with silent focus. He didn't smile. There was no joy in this war, only justice, only return. They thought we were finished, he said softly. His crew's eyes burned with the same quiet fire. They erased our name from their stars. Now we carve it back in their skies. The alien fleet tried one last coordinated strike, forming a ring around the Titan. Their capital ships, massive and bright, charged their heaviest cannons. Energy beams cut through the darkness like spears of gold. For a heartbeat, it looked like they had cornered the beast. But the Titan didn't retreat. It accelerated forward, straight into the storm, shields flaring bright. It unleashed every weapon at once, railguns, plasma cannons, torpedoes, and kinetic strikes. The sky turned into a storm of light and fire. Ships melted, formations collapsed. The last of the Golden Fleet cracked like glass beneath the hammer of Earth's fury. When the final explosion faded, silence filled the void. Smoke and burning wreckage drifted where once an empire's proud fleet had stood. One ship remained. One ship that should have never risen again. The Titan hovered in the darkness like a shadow carved from war itself. In the Golden Council chamber, the Emperor lowered his head slowly. The room was silent. Ministers, who once boasted of victory, now stared at their feet. They had forgotten why humanity was feared. Now they remembered, and on the Titan's bridge, the captain gave one quiet order. "Set course," he said. "The heart of their empire waits." The storm was no longer at their doorstep. It was moving toward their throne. The news of the Titan's victory over the Golden Fleet spread like a crack through the entire galaxy. Empires that had mocked Earth now whispered its name in fear. For years, they had spoken of humanity like a shadow, something long gone, something dead. But now, that shadow had become a storm, and every star system was watching. Broadcasts from the burning battlefield replayed across alien channels, showing a single black warship standing alone against a fleet and tearing it apart like it was nothing. Soldiers stared at the screens in silence. Civilians whispered prayers. Commanders who once laughed now clenched their fists, knowing a new war had begun. In the Golden Council chamber, fear had replaced pride. The Emperor sat frozen, his golden robes no longer shining with confidence. Around him, his generals argued in panicked voices. "We must strike first before it reaches the core." One shouted, "No, we need the entire armada. We can't face that thing alone." Another screamed back. Maps of their empire filled the holographic table, red warning lights spreading from system to system. Every sensor, every defense line, every outpost, they were all focused on one thing, the Titan. Their empire was powerful, their fleets were vast, but they had never faced a monster like this alone. And the worst part was not the Titan's guns, it was what it represented. Humanity had returned. On the Titan's bridge, the atmosphere was the opposite. No one spoke loudly. No one shouted. The crew moved like a single heartbeat, their hands steady on the controls. The captain stood at the center, eyes fixed on the star map hovering before him. The next target glowed red, the core of the empire, the golden capital. Around him, his officers read out enemy movements. "They're mobilizing sector fleets," one reported. 72 ships inbound from the western rim, another 100 gathering around their defense wall. The captain's voice was calm. "Good," he said softly. "Let them gather. One strike will be enough." The AI hummed quietly, processing millions of calculations per second. "Recommend hyperspace jump in 2 hours," it said. "Fuel and weapons at full capacity. Shields at maximum integrity." The crew listened in silence. They weren't fighting for conquest. They weren't fighting for power. They were fighting for a promise made long ago when humanity fell, a promise that they would rise again. Meanwhile, in the alien empire's largest orbital shipyard, thousands of workers rushed to prepare their golden warships. Massive engines roared as cruisers and dreadnoughts launched one after another. Commanders barked orders over panicked comms. Their empire had crushed dozens of species before, but something about this was different. This was not a rebellion. This was a reckoning. The name Titan echoed through their ranks like an old nightmare. Many soldiers remembered the stories passed down by their ancestors. The first time Titan appeared, the night their greatest fleet vanished into fire. Across neutral systems, other species watched the events in silence. For years, they had hidden beneath the shadow of the Golden Empire, powerless to resist. Now, for the first time, they saw cracks in the Golden Throne. A single human ship had done what no one dared to try. And whispers spread like wind. If the Titan can break their fleets, maybe the Empire can fall. As the alien armadas gathered, the Titan prepared. Its massive black hull gleamed against the stars, glowing with the blue veins of its reactor. Missiles were armed, railguns aligned, shield generators hummed like living things. Deep in the ship, human soldiers checked their weapons in silence. Some of them had fought in the last war. Others were born in the dark, raised with one purpose, to finish what their ancestors started. They weren't afraid. They were ready. The captain stared out the viewport at the endless void ahead. His reflection flickered in the glass, half man, half shadow. "They thought we were ashes," he whispered. "They were wrong." The engines roared, a deep, thunderous sound that carried across the void like the growl of something ancient and unstoppable. The Titan's thrusters flared, carving a path through space. It wasn't running. It was hunting. In the golden capital, alarms rang through the night sky. The Emperor stood at the balcony of his tower, watching his proud fleet gather like a shield around his world. But deep down, even he felt it. That cold fear, that silent truth. Humanity wasn't coming to negotiate. It was coming to end the Empire's age. The storm that rose from the dust was now heading straight for his throne. And there was nothing left to laugh at. The Titan was coming. The Black Titan warship cut through the void like a blade through still water. Behind it lay the shattered remains of the Golden Fleet, burning and silent. Ahead of it, the Golden Capital burned with lights as their entire empire mobilized in panic. Alarms echoed across their defense networks, ships scrambled from orbital docks, and entire battalions rushed to take positions. But fear had already taken root. Every commander knew the truth. They were no longer hunting a ghost. The ghost was hunting them. Inside the council tower, the Emperor stood in front of the grand window, staring at the sky with cold, shaking hands. His advisors spoke fast, drowning in fear. "We have every ship in the sector deployed," one stammered. "More than 300 ready to intercept. That ship cannot be allowed to reach the capital," another hissed. But their voices were weak, like wind against a storm. Deep down, they all remembered the old stories. Once their ancestors had faced this same warship. Back then, they had survived by retreating. This time, there was nowhere to run. On the Titan's bridge, everything was silent, except for the hum of the engines. The captain stood at the center, surrounded by his crew. Their faces were calm, their eyes sharp. They had walked through fire to get here. The star map before them showed the capital world glowing like a golden jewel. The AI's voice broke the silence. Enemy fleet detected, 337 ships. Formation ahead. Defensive grid active. The captain didn't even blink. "Prepare the main cannon," he said, "and keep moving." Alien warships filled the darkness like a wall of gold. Their energy signatures lit up every scanner in the system. They moved with precision and discipline, forming a perfect cage around the capital. But against the Titan, perfection was nothing. As soon as the human warship entered firing range, hundreds of enemy cannons opened fire. Beams of gold lit up the night sky, streaking toward the black hull like a storm of fire. But the Titan's shields flared bright blue, swallowing the attack like a living creature, breathing in smoke. It didn't slow down. It didn't break. It roared forward, "Return fire," the captain ordered, his voice steady like steel. The Titan's railguns spun into position, glowing with cold light. The first shot tore through an enemy battleship like it was made of paper, splitting it clean in half. The second shot vaporized a cruiser. Then came the missiles, a wave of blue fire streaking into the fleet, detonating across their golden formation like thunder striking a field of dry leaves. Ships exploded in rapid bursts, breaking their perfect wall into scattered, screaming chaos. On the alien command bridge, generals shouted over one another. "Close formation! Surround it!" Hit it again. But every time they moved, the Titan moved faster. Every time they struck, it struck harder. It wasn't just fighting. It was dismantling their empire one ship at a time. Their proud golden fleet, the strongest in the galaxy, was dying before their eyes. The Emperor gripped the edge of the window, his reflection shaking as he whispered, "How is this possible?" His advisor didn't answer. There was no answer. For years they had called humanity weak. For years they had believed their fleet was unstoppable. But the Titan had no fear, no hesitation. It was a storm, and storms do not beg. As the Golden Fleet broke apart, the Titan descended toward the capital itself. Anti-orbital cannons on the planet's surface fired wildly, trying to pierce its shields. Blue light burned across the sky as the Titan absorbed hit after hit without slowing. On the ground, civilians looked up at the night and saw a black shape breaking through their defenses like a god from a forgotten age. Whispers spread like fire through the streets. "The humans have returned." The captain stood tall on the bridge as the capital filled the viewport. "They took everything from us," he said softly. "Tonight, we remind them who we are." The ship's massive main cannon charged, filling the void with a deep, vibrating hum that felt like the heartbeat of a giant. Across the planet, sensors screamed warnings. Generals gave their final desperate orders. And then the sky exploded with light. The Titan's shot ripped through the golden capital's shield grid like it was nothing. Towers fell. Command stations vanished in fire. Fleets shattered in orbit. And as the light faded, silence followed. The empire that once ruled the stars now knelt under the shadow of the ship they thought was dead. In the golden tower, the Emperor fell to his knees. He looked up at the burning sky and whispered the word he had spent his life laughing at. Titan. On the bridge of the warship, the captain closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't just a victory. It was justice written in fire. Humanity had risen from the dust, and the galaxy would never forget this night.